Sweet, so I'm heading over to Nebo, which is a really cool agency, to talk to a guy named Adam Harrell. And Adam started the agency. He was like the founder of the agency back in the day. I know you're gonna enjoy this. It's gonna be really fun. Ooh, check this out. There's a dog. Hey dog. Hey buddy. So I was gonna do it in a coffee shop today, but you know what sucks is that the coffee shop was way too loud and they weren't willing to turn it down a little bit. Coffee shops should really consider how loud everything is. I mean, like, I feel like coffee shops are meant for people to have conversations at. And if you can't have a conversation at a coffee shop because your music is so loud, all people are gonna do is put their headphones on and not chat. So I'm heading over and chatting with somebody in a little bit quieter space today. And I know everyone out there is gonna enjoy that because, hey, you guys have been not too happy with the audio quality. Speaking of audio quality, there's a train. Sweet. We can actually get started now. So I guess tell me about, how you got to Nebo. Like, because I knew Kim, I knew like the whole like progression.
Every progression of Nebo.
Yeah, when it was over across the street, I guess, in the smaller office and stuff like that. So like I've seen like snapshots over the years, but I've never never heard the whole story. So,
so the origin, I guess, the official origin story, Nebo was started in 2004. So we opened up, right after the .com bust. I had graduated university, had a bunch of freelance clients. My brother was down here. He was working for a telecom / connectivity company, and they were going under. They were one of those companies that was founded in the late 90s, and like they just smashed a bunch of companies from across the world together, and they were like, we'll make money. Yeah. And it didn't happen. So that was sort of what led us to start. We didn't come into it with a business plan or anything. But
as all agencies do. They don't start with a business plan.
Exactly. Neither of us have worked in an agency. But what we had done was we'd been doing this web thing for a long time. In the mid 90s, like I got super fascinated with the internet. Like when I was probably 15 or 16. So I started building websites and doing that sort of thing. And at the time, I was working at a Winn-Dixie. I was 14 years old. And
in Georgia?
No, this was in North Carolina.
Oh, okay, cool. There's a bunch of Winn-Dixies.
Yeah, Winn-Dixie.
Everywhere.
And the manager of the store came up and he was like, "Hey, I want you to clean all the baseboards in the store." And I was like, cool, and started to do it.
You were like, cool. Like, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted.
I was 14, like $4 and 25 cents an hour. Like, I'd always sort of done like work stuff. Like my grandfather had a farm, and he would pay me $2.15 an hour because I was worth half a man.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So like.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great farm logic. I love farm logic.
Yeah. That's what my grandfather said. He's like, you're worth half a man, I'll pay you half minimum wage. So the manager comes up and he's like, "Hey, I want you to clean the baseboards." So I start looking at it, and like it was really sort of a pain in the ass because they were metal baseboards, and you had to bend over and do it, and it took a long time. So I went to the back, and there was a broken mop, and I snapped off the tip, and I built a little cardboard rig, and I like tied a rag around it, and I built this little rig, and I could just knock them out. So I finished in like 20 minutes. And I go back, and I was sort of like proud of him. I was like, "Hey man, knocked it out, built this thing." And he like took the thing and he's like, "Well, you got 2 hours left, do it again."
Oh, wow.
And in his mind, I'm just some 14-year-old.
Yes.
He has nothing for me to do. It's a slow day, just busy work.
As most of those jobs are busy work.
Yeah, it was busy work. So like I went home the next day and then I talked to my stepdad at the time. And I was like, told him about it. I was like, I want to sell websites. I was like 14 or 15. And he was like, okay. He's like, what do you need? And I was like, I need business cards. So he lent me like $37 to buy business cards. And
there's no Vista print back then.
No, it was like going to the local place.
You had to go get.
You like picked your logo out of like a little like Rolodex type thing, and you're like, you know, I want this.
I want this like flower that looks all like
Mine was a
letterpress
computer.
flower.
Yeah, mine was a letterpress computer in blue. It said Adam Harrell Web Design. So like I turned in my notice at Winn-Dixie, and I went around like downtown Statesville, North Carolina, trying to sell websites, and got like a couple folks who were interested, like a lawyer and a historical society, and then a furniture store. And the furniture store was really interesting. So we built the site, and it was called SaveOnFurniture.com, and it ranked in the very, very early search engines, like pre-Google.
Save on Furniture, it's pretty good words.
Yeah. So SaveOnFurniture.com, and at that time, people from California suddenly started finding it, and they'd send emails through, and they'd be like, "I want this piece of furniture," and we'd be like, "Okay, take a picture from a catalog, like a printed catalog, scan it, and then like mail it back to them." And they would circle it, and they'd write us a check, and like that was how the orders were processed.
Wow.
But it did like a good bit of revenue. Like within a year, the online portion was doing more than the retail store. And at that time, furniture you were allowed to sell across state lines and stuff. And I think in '98 they ended up changing that, and they said they could only sell within their state, and it like destroyed the online portion of the business. But they were honestly in it too early. Maybe '97 when they did that. But so that was sort of how I was like, okay, this internet's a thing. Like, if people will email me from California wanting to buy a dresser, and like I can sell them a dresser via email, then this is a real thing. Yeah, you know. And I think we ended up doing like the year before the geographic limitations on sales were, and I think they ended up doing over $1 million in online revenue, which was pretty big back then.
How old were you at this point?
16.
16. So how much did you get paid to do that?
Oh yeah, it was nothing. I think by the end I was like, I started at 13 an hour. Or no, I started at 7, and then they gave me a raise to 13, and then they gave me a raise.
Which was huge because you were getting paid half a man earlier.
Yeah, I was getting paid half a man. And then I think by the end they were paying me like 18 or 22.
Yeah.
And then I went off to college, and I studied political science in college, did a bunch of traveling and stuff like that. And then I maintained freelance stuff, so that was it was an easy way to work, you know. At that time, broadband was really tough to get, so like I ran Ethernet from a dentist office that was like had an ISDN line,
and
like
they let
through
you
the
share?
woods. I paid them.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah. I paid them $100
you weren't
a
just
month.
You weren't just plugging it in someone's jack in the back and then just running a cable. And
But
they
like
just never
squirrels
found
would
it.
eat my internet
Like
all the time.
putting leaves over it and stuff like that.
It was like literally like an Ethernet cable through the woods, and like squirrels would eat it.
That time of the world is probably my nightmare in general. Just like that just sounds like terrible.
Yeah. But it was like the only way I could get high speed without living on campus. I didn't like living on campus. So and
What
that
school
was just, Appalachian State.
Oh, cool, awesome. Yeah.
Boone, North Carolina.
Yeah. That's cool.
So then I moved down here. My brother was living down here at the time, and we said, why not? You know, let's see if we can do something. Kim Lincoln, who you know, who's now our president, she was actually, I think she was hired like year 3, so she was like one of our first interns that like stayed around, and then she left and came back and been with us ever since.
That's cool, man. How do you guys mitigate like what you're actually amazing at versus what your clients ask you for?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always a question of like, is this something we should do or not? And to us, it's less about, is this something we've done a million times before versus is this something we're willing to invest what it takes to get right? And I guess that's the difference a little bit. We always call ourselves like a human-centered agency for the digital world, and at the end of the day, it's like, what are people's wants, what are their needs, what are their aspirations? If we can understand that, like the channel doesn't matter. You know, most of what we do is in the digital space, but you know, we have clients where we handle an entire catalog production process out, and that catalog is sent to 1 million people. And like we have clients where, you know, we do social community management. It's like completely different. So it really ranges, and it's not so much about the actual service being done as much about can you find the right people to work on the problem, and are you willing to invest to get the problem solved? And the problem is if you get a mismatch. If you try to have somebody that's good at something do something they can't do.
So tell me, like, what was I guess during that process, what was like the darkest moment? When was it like, this might break, you know, like it may not happen? Was there a point?
Couple.
Okay.
Yeah, there's been a couple. I mean, there were times, and we've had times where right after the big financial collapse, and like people just stopped paying, and you're like, we have what, $400,000 in accounts receivables, and no one wants to pay.
They were like, no money. Like they were
they
like,
just weren't
no,
cutting
sorry.
checks.
Because that's when I decided to actually be a software engineer. I was an architecture major in school at Southern Poly, and I was like, I knew how to build things, and I knew user interface and user experience design because I had to build actual physical items that people would interact with, and then I could present because I had to present those things. You know,
I mean,
and so all of those skills compiled into that.
This industry is largely a rhetorical one. You know, people think design is about how well you can design, development's about how well you can develop, but at the end of the day, like any services industry is a rhetorical industry, architecture included.
How has your experience been here versus, I mean, you came from somewhere else. You're I don't know if transplant's correct, but you moved here, right?
Yeah, I think if you've been in Atlanta for 3 years, you're a local.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So that's the Atlanta rule. But
if you leave, actually, I found that you've got to start all over.
Start all over. Yeah. If you leave Atlanta, it's still 3 years.
Yeah. I lived here for 27 years or 26 years. And when I came back, it was like, I got to start over.
Got to start over. No longer a local.
Yes.
You know, I've said it before, but I think the idea of Atlanta is an interesting one because it was built a railroad town, right? And it's a town where most people aren't from here. You know, I forgot his name now. Ambassador Andrew Young.
Okay,
he's the one that said Atlanta's a city of dreams and dreamers, right? And I truly believe that because if you come here, this is one of the few cities where you could try to just get involved with things. People will meet with you, they'll talk with you. If you're willing to donate your time, your energy, like you can make things happen here, and that can't happen in other cities. You know, some folks like to say that Atlanta isn't fully baked, you know, or the idea that Atlanta isn't perfect. That's what makes it cool because you can try to make it as you think it should be. And I think that to a large extent is true. This is a place where you can come and make a difference. And I don't honestly know that if we could have started anywhere else. Like as a 23-year-old from Appalachian State with like no agency experience, I could meet with people and they'd be like, all right, I'll meet you at the end then. Hey, you know what? That sounds pretty good. We'll give it a try. Yeah. And that doesn't happen everywhere, you know. So it's a pretty opening community.
Part of that Atlanta conversation is how I got involved or how I got in touch with you, right? And so Charlton from Startup Atlanta, he's the, I guess, executive director. And you're on the board with Startup Atlanta, right? So I guess
I hired Charlton.
Yeah, exactly. So and he's told me a good bit of this story, and so but I'm interested in like what your involvement is with Startup Atlanta, what Startup Atlanta means to this kind of community, and what your thoughts are on it.
So, I mean, I think the purpose of Startup Atlanta is really to connect and grow the ecosystem. And one of the things Charlton likes to say is an ecosystem is made up of a few different groups. One is like the founders themselves. The others are sort of the startup enthusiasts. And then the others are sort of the support ecosystem around them. And all of those areas really need a little bit of gardening is almost a metaphor. Like, how do you tend to each of those audiences, make sure they interact and they connect, and if you do that, you can create these sort of serendipitous interactions that lift up the whole thing. So I think it's a great organization. And Charlton's doing a great job, and I think we're lucky in that the folks in Atlanta who had the foresight to say, you know what, we need an organization that is an independent entity whose only job is to make sure everyone else communicates, gets along, and shares. And that's sort of a rare thing, you know. So I think they're a truly neutral party that is in it for the good of the region.
So I guess what do you do that isn't this, right? Like Nebo, right? Like what? I know you said you got a kid and everything like that, but do you go fishing? Do you play frisbee? Is this like what is life like outside of this?
Normally I just go home and like just sit and cry in front of the TV.
I do that a lot, like, but I've got a 75-inch TV, so I cry in front of a big TV. It makes me feel.
I don't even have a big TV.
Oh, that's disappointing, man. I just got this picture.
I put an iPhone on a mantle.
But you've got the ESPN app. You're that guy that's like the thing floating around.
I don't even have cable.
Oh no.
No, you know, most of my involvement has to do around these weird like civic, social things. So I end up doing a lot of volunteer stuff, largely because I have a hard time saying no.
Like chili cook-offs and stuff like that?
Yeah, exactly, chili cook-offs.
Yeah.
No, you know, so I end up serving on some boards and helping out with a lot of just random things. Outside of that, it's I go home, cook dinner every night, take my daughter to preschool every morning. You know, I try to be a decent dad on the weekends. But man, being a dad's tough.
Yeah.
Kids are exhausting, and like we have different ideas of fun.
Oh yeah.
And my daughter's bossy.
Oh
like,
really?
Yeah, like she will tell you what you are going to play, and she will like direct you. Like she's gonna be a screenwriter one day.
That's
She'll be like,
awesome.
Dad, you're gonna be the king of flowers.
Yeah.
I'm the king of flowers. He would never say that.